All right, hey COD students. So this is week 4, and for our posture, mobility, stability segment, we're going to talk about the hip. Last week we talked about the pelvis. This week we're moving a little downward to your hip. So stretching out and strengthening your hip can benefit performance, right? It can make your running easier, make you quicker, able to cover more distance, and then also help with injury prevention or even resolution if you're having pain. So let's look at performance first. So the importance of hip strength, a lot of it comes from the motion of hip abduction. So let me show you what hip abduction is. Okay. So if I'm looking at my left hip, this is abduction, is to move the hip away. Okay. When we bring it together, we call that adduction, but abduction is important. And I'll show you why. If I am in mid strides, okay, so I'm standing on my left leg, my right leg's behind me, and I'm in this position, I'm in mid stride. If you look at me from the front, so I turn myself here, okay, and I'm in this position, I'm running here, I'm standing, or my left leg is touching the ground to push me off, you can see that most of my weight sits over here, and here's my stance leg. What that's doing is that's dropping me. Gravity wants to drop me in this fashion, and I counteract that by the muscles on the outside of my hip that would abduct my hip. What they're doing here is they're stabilizing me, okay? So it's important that we have very strong, again, looking at my left hip, hip abduction, okay? And I talked about kind of chronic weakness or kind of typical weakness we see in people. Hip abduction is often weak in people. So today we're going to look at stretching and strengthening the hip. If we look at injury prevention, a number of you mentioned that you have or have had knee pain. Knee pain often has its source in hip tightness and hip weakness, and here's why. Your kneecap, which we call your patella, rides in a groove here. So as you extend and flex your knee, or as you walk or as you run, that kneecap moves up and down a little bit across your femur, across the bone of your upper leg, okay? If everything's great, then that kneecap just tracks right in this groove that it's supposed to, okay? If there's dysfunction in one way or another, that kneecap is going to move out of the groove, okay? Is at least one theory. It's moving out of the groove, and it's the bottom of that kneecap is hitting some bony prominences on the knee and causing you knee pain. We call that patellofemoral syndrome. Patella is your kneecap, femur is the bone of the upper leg. So the original theory was, hey, the kneecap's not moving right? The femur's where it's supposed to be, but the kneecap is not moving correctly. Maybe we have some weakness in our quads. That was the kind of the old school thinking. The new school thinking is, you know what? The kneecap is moving up and down where it's supposed to. What the problem is that the femur is rotated inward because of hip weakness, and that's what's causing the kneecap to hit the femur. So it's the idea of, they used to think it was the train was not on the tracks, the train was off the track, and now what they're saying is, you know what, the train is moving where it's supposed to, the track has moved underneath it, the track being the femur. Kind of a long explanation, but the takeaway is we need that strong hip abduction along with external rotation, right? So the muscles that rotate my toes outward and the muscles that bring my leg apart need to be strong and stable for my running. And so those are your glutes, your glute max, your glute medius, and your glute minimus. A lot of times people exercise their glute max at the gym, right? They're doing their squats, they're doing their straight hip extension, right? Just straight behind you, which is great to do, but you also need to do some hip abduction and some hip external rotation. So I'm going to show you first a couple stretches just to stretch out your hip, and then we'll look at 2 strengthening activities for your hip. So first stretch, those of you that have taken yoga from maybe Wendy or Nelly know the pigeon pose. It's great just for that distraction, right? Your hip is a ball and socket joint. We just want to get that hip a little bit out of there, create some space. Okay, so you're going to be down on the floor or on the mat. You're going to bring whatever hip you're stretching, you're bringing that knee forward. So I'm going to do my left hip. I'm bringing my left knee forward. And I need to get in the camera. There we go. Right leg is back behind. Okay. If you have knee pain or knee issues, be cautious with this one, right? Maybe lower yourself only a little bit, but the goal is to bring your chest down to your knee and hold, okay? And again, we're holding for 30 seconds. I'm not gonna do it now for the sake of time. I mentioned stretching for a minimum of 30 seconds. Studies have shown that there is a big difference. You know, if you only stretch for 15 seconds, there's a big difference between the person that stretches for 30. What they haven't shown is that if somebody stretches for 30 seconds and somebody stretches for a minute, they haven't shown that that minute actually makes that big of a difference. But they have showed that we do need to at least get to 30 seconds. So that's why I say hold your stretches for at least 30 seconds. Okay. The next stretch we're going to do is to increase the intensity of the hip flexor stretch that we did last week. Some of you asked for a little more aggressive stretches, kind of stretch to tolerance, right? So if you can handle that, do it. If not, stick with the original. Okay, what you're gonna do is you're gonna get in that lunge position. I'm stretching my left hip, left knee's down, right foot is up in a lunge. And what I'm gonna do is I want to, again, keep my pelvis level, lean forward and get the hip flexor stretch, but then I'm gonna add my knee. Okay, I'm gonna flex or bend my knee. So I put this hand over on here for balance, reach back with the opposite hand, right? So here's my right hand reaching for my left ankle. And you're here. Okay, again, you're gonna tighten your abs, you're gonna tighten your glutes, and you should feel a stretch from the front of your thigh all the way down across the knee. Okay, and again, holding for 30 seconds. Okay, so we have 2 stretches to do for some hip mobility. There's a number of other hip mobility exercises we'll get into. I just want to kind of start the process. So hip strengthening. Let's start with the hip abduction, right? So you can do kind of the typical Jane Fonda, right? Where you're on your side here and you're going this motion. Okay, good exercise. What they have found is they put electrodes on people's hip abductors, the ones that move it apart, and they found that what they call the fire hydrant is the most efficient way to strengthen your hip abductors and your hip external rotators, mainly your glute medius. So what you're going to do is you can do it without a band. I'll show that first. So it's called a fire hydrant because if you picture a male dog coming to a fire hydrant, okay, I'm hands and knees, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to lift this leg out to the side and back down. Okay, you'll find it's pretty easy to just do maybe sets of 5 or 10. But the best strengthening activity is to get yourself a band. You can even just use a bike tube, a bike inner tube. You're going to put it below your knees. Okay, and you're here. I'm going to change my angle a little bit. I'm here, and I'm bringing this leg out. Okay, sets of 5 or 10. And actually the best thing you can do is just get there and hold. Okay, I took a course on running injuries, and they said the goal for somebody recovering from like patellofemoral syndrome would be to hold that stretch or that position with the rubber, with the kind of a moderately strength band for a minute. And what that does is they say not only does it strengthen the muscle, but it also kind of reinforces that signal from your brain to the hip to get those muscles to fire. Okay, so fire hydrant, great exercise for hip strengthening. I do, if I don't have a band, I typically do kind of a little circuit with the hip, and it's all in that, we call it quadruped position, the hands and knees position. Okay, so it looks something like this. I'm here. I'm going to start with that hip extension that I talked about, the donkey kicks, right? So I'm here, and I'm just going to kick back. My sole of my foot goes to the ceiling, and I do maybe 10 of those. Lost count, but let's call that 10. Okay, then I'm going to go into, I'm going to turn myself so you can see, I'm going to go into that fire hydrant position. And I'm going to do 10 of those. Let's say that's 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay. The next motion I'm going to do is a forward circle and then a backward circle. So 10 times forward. I'm here. And I'm going to bring that leg forward in a circle. So that's 9, 10. And then I'm going to go backwards. 1, 2, 3, until I get to 9 and 10. Okay? So again, it's straight hip extension in the quadruped position, hip abduction in the quadruped position, and then a rotation, kind of like a forward hip circle, and then a backward hip circle. And then you would, of course, do it on the other side. Again, resistance, you can find these at any sporting goods store. Like I said, you can get a bike tube, cut it into a piece, and tie it into a loop. Yeah, and it works great. So, give that a try. All I'm going to ask you to do is give it a try. Comment down below, hey, did it work for you? I know we have people at all different levels, right? So, if you can comment in any way you want, hey, this worked for me, this was great, it was just what I needed, fine. Or this was, too difficult, I couldn't do it. Can you give me some modifications, and I can address that either later this week or next week. Or if you are somebody that's, hey, this is a piece of cake, too easy, then tell me maybe what you're doing. Say, hey, have you ever seen this exercise? You can describe it, you can shoot me a video, what have you. Or if you just want something more aggressive, then I can see what I can come up with. So, try the 4 exercises, 2 stretches, 2 strengthening things for a total of 4 exercises, and tell me what you think. All right, great job so far. We'll talk to you later.